You are now entering a dangerous liberty zone where God-given natural rights are held sacred and exercised. This is your warning. Tyranny, fascism, and censorship will not be tolerated. Ideas will be exchanged freely. Rigorous debate and open discourse is encouraged. If you are weak and your beliefs are fragile, you should leave now. Prepare yourself. We are now live on the Dangerous Liberty Podcast.
My name is Gary Melton, and this is the Dangerous Liberty Podcast. In this episode, I talk with Becca, who is known as BX on social media. I'm going to leave links to her accounts down in the description below, and I highly recommend that you go follow her and you support her work. She has spent the last several years uncovering child exploitation networks that are using online games to identify and target their victims. Her efforts have led to multiple federal investigations and arrests. As she continued to investigate these networks, she also uncovered the Order of Nine Angles and the 764 network. Both have been directly linked to mass shootings, and both of these groups seem to have perfected systematically radicalizing and manipulating seemingly normal teens to commit mass murder and other horrendous acts. We also discuss how these groups may be involved in the Charlie Kirk assassination as well. This is probably the most important story most people have never heard about. Instead of allowing this information to be shared, BX has been heavily censored by social media, and without so much as a warning or an explanation, she was permanently banned from YouTube. Why this information has never been reported by major news networks? Well, I'll let you draw your own conclusions. I found this conversation fascinating and enlightening, and I think you will as well. This is a story that every American needs to know about, and I find it criminal that this information is being suppressed. I encourage you to research the topics we discuss and confirm the validity of what is said for yourself. Once you do that, I humbly ask that you share this so we can prevent future tragedies.
So Becca, first of all, I guess for people that don't know, aren't familiar with your work, just kind of start off like where all this began for you, I guess.
Well, I used to have a pretty cool gun wall behind me, kind of like yours. I started out doing gun talk and just video game streaming on the Twitch platform, believe it or not, probably about 7 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And back at that time, I was really into self-defense, talking about self-defense situations. I was a concealed carry instructor in Texas, competitive shooter for like 15 years. And so that was my passion, and I just wanted to share it with people. But eventually, as I delved into, and I'm also like a mom. I'm a mom in Texas. I have a young daughter. And so, getting on the internet and being kind of around the internet for the first time, just like in depth was an eye-opening experience for me, because what I started to find was that there was a lot of dangers to kids on these platforms like Twitch, or Instagram or YouTube even. We have child predator rings operating in plain sight. And not only distributing illicit content of children, but also using those platforms to find children who are unsupervised and, coerce them, groom them into doing all kinds of horrible stuff. So, as I grew as a creator, I kind of started to shift from this real world personal defense, which is what I was, classically trained in, to how do you protect your kids from this new threat of the online world, which really wasn't there when we were kids, right? So growing up now with young children, a lot of parents don't have the technological literacy to understand how to keep their kids safe online. And so I started to delve into that. I found a child predator network operating on the Twitch platform. And, at the time I realized it was really bad, but I guess I didn't really know how bad it was, but I had been trying to get people to listen to me about it, trying to get Twitch's attention. Eventually I started going to the media, and eventually Bloomberg News put out their own story about the Twitch predator ring. And it turned out that almost 300,000 children had been targeted in a 1-year span by this coordinated ring of 2,000 pedophiles. And it was just a really shocking number that you probably, a lot of people might not believe that unless they saw it from like Bloomberg, right?
Right.
And so at that time, it's kind of really started to understand how bad things were.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm just curious, when you started trying to bring this to the attention of Twitch, what was their response?
Well, at the time I was pretty small. I mean, I was a Twitch partner at the time, but I didn't have a lot of reach. I was kind of the black sheep of Twitch, right? They're not big on the gun stuff. There's a lot of maybe left-leaning people on the platform who really didn't like me, and so the response was really limited. I mean, I didn't get through to anybody until the media picked it up and started running with it. And so, that was just a little win, I guess. In the meantime, I had also, and I guess I should say that after the Bloomberg expose, this was actually kind of a crazy story because the same day that Bloomberg story broke, Twitch suddenly decided to ban gambling and start this huge controversy over the gambling ban, strategically probably so that they could try to drown out the bad PR from the Bloomberg story. But regardless so nobody really heard about it because none of the creators talked about it. But the authorities and the regulatory bodies did hear about it. And so what ended up happening is that the UK, their regulatory body, which is called Ofcom, came to Twitch and said, you have to fix this or we're going to ban your platform from the UK and fine you hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so that's when Twitch started implementing a lot of new age verification technology and other stuff. It's kind of a long story, but it did lead to changes at Twitch when all of this eventually came out. So that was a win.
So what are they having? Like, do you feel like Twitch's response with the age verification and things like that was effective?
It was effective. In fact, after they had finished implementing it and made their announcement about it and everything, we went back and tried to recreate some of the research that we had before, which was basically just going to these 0-1 viewer streams and looking for kids, because you can really see them. They're children with phones looking confused who just press go live on their device. Their parents probably didn't even realize they had it. And we're talking to kids that were like 8, 9, 10. So way younger than Twitch's minimum age. And what Twitch did was that one thing, they implemented AI detection of chats, because what happens is these predators would pour into these kids' channels and they would start trying to get them to go off platform, or they would try to just get them to do something sexual right there on the stream. So Twitch implemented some AI safety measures to automatically ban those accounts and automatically ban the children who were clearly children streaming. And so, yeah, it was definitely effective. There's still problems, but it's not 300,000 kids in a year level of that's shocking, because it's what we were trying to get through to people was like, if your child is unsupervised on Twitch, it's not a matter of if or when. It's not a matter of if these bad guys are going to find them and target them. It's when. Like, they are 100% going to be targeted. So because they were finding them the same way we were finding them, right? It's not hard. And so, yeah, it was a really shocking and widespread problem on Twitch. And then as I kind of grew into that field of like researching these harms to children online, I found it was a lot more widespread. It was the same problem essentially on TikTok and Snapchat. And, that's not even getting into like the stuff we'll probably get into with Discord. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of really nasty stuff out there that parents probably don't know about.
Yeah. And just for the viewers out there, I'll tell you how I came across Becca and her work. The first thing I came across was basically the theory of accelerationism. And I found that very interesting. And on top of that, very true. And I'll let her explain that. And then somebody sent me a video, which I'll make sure I link that down in the description. And I'll also link in the description all of BX's different socials. I know you're on X. What other platforms are you on?
Mainly X is where I do my I have an echo going on. Is that me?
Do you hear it?
Test. No, I think it was me. I bumped my mic and it did something weird. Sorry, you can edit that part out.
Yeah,
I'm such a nerd and I'm clumsy and I've never been the right person for this, by the way. But
I think you're exactly the right person for this.
but on X, I do a lot of tweeting. That's my biggest platform. But I also do work on Substack. I publish all of my articles there. A lot of them are free. Some of them, are paywalled so that people can support some of my more in-depth research. But I also have a 6-part documentary video series. It's on Rumble, X, and Substack for free. That kind of describes my entire journey from start to finish and what I found when I started to look a little deeper into these online dangers to children and what was actually going on. And I found that it was more than just sexual exploitation. It was terrorism. There were people trying to groom your kids to go commit terror attacks. And that's where I really started to kind of sink my teeth and try to, let's figure out what's going on and why is nobody talking about this?
Well, yeah, and I think it was one of the different parts of that docuseries that you made that I ended up watching. And when I first started watching it, you start laying out these different organizations.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest with you, I was like, there's no way, this is nuts. And then so independently, when this is what I always do, like when I see things like this, I start researching these individual organizations and come to find out they're absolutely legit. And everything that I've went through in portions that I've watched, and it was only one of the parts, and I'm gonna watch the other 5. But like I couldn't find any fault with anything that you were laying out. And what I think that we're gonna see is you have some of these different organizations that might have slightly different motives, but ultimately what it is child exploitation. And there are definitely major components, whether we're talking about the Epstein files, and we're going to talk about some of the other elements and entities that you're going to talk about tonight. That's one of the things that they have in common. And I think people need to be aware of this. People need to be aware that their kids are being exploited online for all kinds of different things, whether it's something simple as advertising all the way through just being, manipulated and, propagandized through social media, whether it's politics. There are things that kids are being exposed to that I think we as parents need to become much more aware. And I'm really glad.
Absolutely.
The fact is there's one solution to all these problems. And that is, number one, making sure that parents are aware of what's going on online.
Yes.
Number two, making sure that there are things in place, whether it's some sort of supervision. There's obviously, different apps and things like that where you can monitor what your kids are watching. But we got to get much more involved if we really care about our kids, because they're being exposed to things, not only online, but even in school and everything else, that parents just got to get much more involved in there. And that's why we homeschool our kids. But it's a real problem. It's a real problem. And I'm glad you're out there doing exactly what you do. And and as soon as I saw this, I wanted to have you on and be able to lay this out, as opposed to me just like trying to regurgitate your content and try to make people aware of this, when I think you're the best spokesman for it.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I haven't always felt that way. How you mentioned, like at first I saw this and I saw these groups, I was like, this is crazy, and I'm very, very used to that, because when I started doing this back in 2022, the first thing that I started to notice was that mass shootings were kind of connected, in the sense that all of these mass shooters had been in these online chat rooms, had been talking to people online, and I was trying to figure out who these people were that they were talking to, and how these kids were getting radicalized, because there's got to be more to it than this. Oh, this kid just got online one day and was a Nazi and just decided to kill a bunch of people.
Right.
I don't know how a 16-year-old becomes a Nazi.
Right.
That was hard for me to fathom and understand. And so I started to dig into the mass shooting element, and I started to find some very fringe research. It was very fringe research at the time on this concept called accelerationism, which is this idea that by committing violent acts, terror attacks, and also certain nonviolent strategies that can be employed to basically heighten the tension within a country and pit the two sides against each other in a two-party system. So you've got the left and the right, and they're always fighting. And the goal is to do things to make them fight even more. And what you're doing is you're rocking the boat until you tip it over, right? Until it reaches that tipping point, and then that's what they're going for. They're going to accelerate societal collapse. They want the U.S. to collapse. They're not right wing. They're not left wing. Some of them might be national socialists, like actual Nazis, right? Actual, people who, kind of sympathize with the Nazi ideology. But at the same time, these people aren't progressive or conservatives. Like they're not doing things because they want their country to get better, because they want life to improve for them and their American citizens. They're trying to bring everything crashing down. They're trying to destroy America.
Yeah, and that's, we obviously have our problems. And look, I think there are people in the two-party system that I do think are ultimately anti-American, right? But generally speaking, most Democrats, most Republicans, they want the best for their country, and they just see the world through a different lens, and they're trying to better their country, and and we definitely get pitted against one another.
Yeah, sure.
But it's a matter of, it's just a competition of ideas, right?
Yeah.
But then we definitely have foreign adversaries, and we definitely have elements even within our own country that are believe in something that is antithetical to what America is, and they don't want America to be what it is, right? They want, and there's lots of different reasons, whether it's because of our projection of military power, the ideas that we stand for, Christianity, whatever it is, however other people want to describe America and the problems that they have with America. But the fact is that we need to keep our eye on that. And I think, right now we're doing a lot of work with the Charlie Kirk assassination. That's one of the things that I'm going to cover tonight, is I do think there's some elements in here that are trying to cause chaos, that are interjecting all these different things, and very tied into this. And whether it's political, whether it's foreign adversaries, I think they are trying to cause chaos even within this debate. And I think it's something that people need to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if an accelerationist isn't directly responsible for something like a mass shooting or some kind of political assassination in this case, even if they had nothing to do with it, even if it was really just a radicalized third party who had a grudge or something, they're not ones to let something like that go to waste, right? They're going to try to use that to incite division, anything that they can. Any way that they can. And one of the biggest ways that I've seen lately, backing up a little bit, back in 2022, when I started looking into mass shootings, all of the mass shooters were making these manifestos about being basically neo-Nazi, neo-fascist kind of stuff. They were really sympathetic to I guess it kind of stems from the Christchurch, New Zealand shooter, right? This mosque shooter, Brenton Tarrant, who killed all of these people, like 50 people in a mosque in New Zealand. And he live streamed it, and he had the writing all over his guns. And he was also writing these manifestos where he was blaming all of these different people, PewDiePie. He's blaming Candace Owens. He's blaming all of these different people and shouting them out in his manifesto. And he's not doing it because PewDiePie actually influenced him. He's doing it because he wants people to start arguing about it, and he wants to get as viral as possible. It's about virality. So and there's actually there's a term that they coined out of that called the Christchurch model of virality, which has to do with the fact that some of the time what they're saying in the manifesto isn't even what they really believe. It's just whatever that they could say to try to get the most people to react to it. And so, obviously the more politically divisive that they can be, the better. And all of those things increase the chances of accelerating this societal division. They're chaos agents. They want to cause chaos and fighting. And so back then when I was looking into this, it was all neo-Nazi kind of stuff, white supremacist, anti-immigration, even like eco-fascism and kind of these weird fringe kind of concepts that would technically be far right extremism. I don't really like that term because these people are not right. They're not your dad watching Fox News kind of right wing. These people are way outside the political spectrum that we tend to know in America. And so this is why we tend to call it instead of calling it right or left wing extremism, just calling it accelerationism. That's what it is. And so these people that were doing these shootings, I started to kind of look into it and find out about this accelerationism concept. I know you said you watched the first part of my video. As I go through the series, I learn a lot of things, and I kind of changed my opinion on certain things over time. I think it's definitely been a learning process. But the TLDR is that I stumbled upon this fringe satanic cult called the Order of Nine Angles. And this was a cult that was created probably in the late 60s, early 70s by a guy named David Myatt, who's British. And it was really, what it is it's a doomsday cult. It's a cult that teaches that we need to, that humanity is divided into eons. And the one that we're in right now is an eon that's dominated by Judeo-Christian heritage and traditional values, and that we have to overthrow that and cause a collapse so that we can start a new eon of evil and darkness. And they believe that they can channel these evil acts into ritual magic that will bring dark gods back to initiate the apocalypse. And then after the apocalypse, they'll be the only ones that survive, and they'll go on to colonize the Milky Way, because obviously that's what will happen. So it's crazy. It's crazy. And so when you tell people about this, they're like, what the hell is this girl talking about? This is insane. Yeah, it's silly. It's dumb. And if you ask my honest opinion, I still believe that David Myatt, the creator of the cult, was really just a true National Socialist. He was part of the National Socialist Party in the UK at that time in the 70s. And I really think that he was just trying to get a bunch of edgy Satanists to help him destroy the country, because he's into accelerationism. I don't think Myatt ever believed in any of this stuff, but he was trying to become a cult leader and get other people to believe in it. And the ultimate idea behind the cult is that to accelerate this evil within our society, you have to go get other people to do evil acts. So that's one thing that they'll try to do, is they'll try to influence other people to do evil things, on behalf of some other group. And so they'll encourage their members to go and infiltrate institutions like religious institutions or the military or areas of the government or extreme political extremist groups, to try to get those people to go do violent things. It's kind of a form of a false flag, right? In a sense that it's being provoked by an outside force that's trying to make it look like these other people are causing all of this violence so that people will fight over it. And then they don't have to do it themselves, because it's all about manipulation and deceit and whatever else typical Satanism is. So that's what the Order of Nine Angles was. When I first found that it could be possibly linked to some of these mass shootings, it sounded crazy to me too, but I decided to start researching it. Of course, at the time, everybody just called me an insane person. And, it was a hard, lonely time for me for a couple of years where I just kind of kept my nose in the study and kept trying to push the stuff out as I found it. And, it was very controversial, and, it sounded insane. So over time, we would end up finding kind of links between this cult and certain what we call false flag attacks, or mass casualty events that had connections to this cult. So it's definitely very real. And now at this point, I'm sure you have people in the audience that are also thinking this person is crazy. But fortunately for me now, and I would encourage everybody to just go and do some research on your own. Just Google the cult, Google this stuff, and you'll find that it's a widely internationally accepted as truth now by pretty much everybody. The FBI has made comments about it in criminal complaints. There's been State Department memos about it. In other countries, the UK have done a lot of work trying to get this information out, investigative documentaries and stuff of that nature. So it's no longer just me.
Well, the thing I find most interesting about this is you can take Order of Nine Angles and use them as a placeholder, but what I find extremely fascinating, and I know to be true, is the idea of accelerationism. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very likely that there are multiple groups, both internationally, that are just, again, foreign adversaries, but we also have a lot of provocateur political organizations, even here in the United States, that are using the exact same tactic. I think, I think that's the big takeaway, regardless of whatever entity you put in there. Is I think that is absolutely true, that same tactic has been found to be effective and is being implemented, and probably in some ways even being implemented by elements of our own government, right? We know, like,
Sure. Why not? Why wouldn't they?
yeah, look,
Why wouldn't they try to get us to fight?
uh,
Of course they do.
and I know, I come from special operations background. That's one of the things that we do psyops on other countries all the time, and we try to cause disruption. We provoke things, and we plant seeds and misinformation and disinformation. And we do it under the guise of like, hey, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys. But the fact is, these are all proven tactics that we know work, that are being used by very serious people and organizations.
Yeah,
And
the
I
bad
think
guys are doing it to us too.
100%, 100%.
Yeah.
We try to pretend, or we like to pretend, that we're not susceptible to this. And I think if we step back and look at what's going on here in the United States, to me, it's so obvious that it's not even funny.
Yeah, and if you go back, a ways, accelerationism obviously has a long history, even though it might have been under a different name at the time, right?
Right.
But this goes back to like the best historical example is the Italy's years of lead, when we had a lot of CIA stuff going on over there too, post World War II with Operation Gladio and that kind of thing. But the post war Italy was very very much kind of being controlled by this kind of pseudo-fascist state that was trying to commit attacks and blame it on the right wing, commit attacks and blame it on the left wing, and trying to get the people to fight so that they would ultimately be so scared that they would accept a greater, more overbearing government. And people were very very hesitant about that at the time. So if you look up the Italy's years of lead, it's very very interesting time. And there's been some people, accelerationists, threat actors, who have coined the term American years of lead. So the accelerationists, they know this is happening to us right now. They know that we're under an internal attack, basically disinformation, like you said, false flags, committing attacks and making it look like it was this party or that party in order to basically to scare us and to get us to fight and to get us to accept things like gun control or censorship. Right. Those are the kind of things that they see happening as a result of this conflict that they're trying to incite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's obvious. Like, again, every time that we see, there's always that big push for gun control. Every time there's a mass shooting, anytime there's any sort of incident, whether even on the right, look, there was a time, I think we've shifted this. There was a time after a couple of days after Charlie Kirk was assassinated that there was this big call on the right, because we saw this as, hey, this was a radical leftist that was upset about the things that Charlie Kirk said. And then we pushed back and said, hey, you know what's going on here is the fact that the left has been using certain rhetoric for the last 10 years, calling people Nazis, calling people Hitler, basically painting especially effective people on the right, whether it's President Trump, Charlie Kirk, you can name several others, like making sure that we are dehumanizing these people and identifying them as existential threats to the left and to our way of life. And ultimately, the implication is, hey, if we take this person out, number one, we're doing the world a favor, and this is heroic in nature.
Right.
And for a while there was a call on the right for censorship, which I think is completely wrong.
Yeah.
But now that we've even shifted away from that, but that's
like I was saying before, when I first started this, it was white supremacy is the biggest threat to America per Joe Biden. It was, these neo-Nazi kind of ideas, this, anti-immigration stuff. And now we're seeing that a lot of the and I'm the Charlie Kirk thing, that's what it is. But you got to understand, like, I'm looking at mass shootings and school shootings and stuff specifically. And what I started to notice was that over time, that target of that white supremacy shooting shifted to transgender. Okay. Now the topic of conversation has changed to transgenderism. And so then you start seeing a few more, an uptick in this transgender kind of discourse. And that's something that's also going to be exploited, right? Because accelerationists, they go with whatever is the hottest topic at the time. When they start to notice that white supremacy isn't really getting people riled up anymore, and they realize the right gets more riled up by a transgender shooter, that's what they're going to do. That's what focus is going to be. And when you mentioned the censorship thing, yeah, I think in a lot of ways, the censorship part of that is that a lot of people don't understand what free speech is, and they don't understand what free speech isn't. Right? Free speech isn't a true and an imminent threat, but free speech is, I don't like those people, I think they should all be killed. That's free speech. And people don't really, I think that people get upset and they don't really understand that that's the case, so I think there could be a more innocent explanation there. But one thing I did notice, and it wasn't just after the Charlie Kirk shooting, but it was after there was another militant transgender person who shot up was it the ICE building or something? I'm trying to remember which one it was. I don't think he was a transgender.
I don't think he
Which
was.
one was it? It was the Covenant Christian School shooting, right?
Okay.
So we saw a lot of people on the right start saying, you know what, we should ban guns from transgender people. And then, for me, I have to say, no, I'm a 2A absolutist, right? This cannot be solved by gun control. Even if you think that certain people are more inclined to violence, or they should be passing psychological tests. No. Never am I going to agree that that's the path that we should take. And I think that it's a dangerous path. And I think that it's one that accelerationists particularly know that will cause a whole lot of fighting if gun legislation gets passed. And so getting the right to accept a version of gun control had to be a big victory for them. And it was disappointing to me as a longtime gun person to see certain people on the right advocating for mental health background checks and things of that nature. I don't like that. I don't think it will work. Number one, it's not going to prevent any of this. And number two, that's just it's a foot in the door for this kind of thing that we're talking about, which is more government. Right? We don't need more government, in my opinion. So that's definitely the case. But with the transgender issue, we also saw a lot of misinformation. I'm sure you have a lot of viewers who are under the impression that like almost every mass shooting in recent history has been a transgender. That's just not true. There's been strategic disinformation spread about mass shootings to make people think that there are more transgenders than there are being responsible for these. And this includes completely fake narratives about people who were, shooters who were not in any sense transgender. But I'll post an article about them or a picture of them, and half the comments will just be convinced this person is transgender. I'm like, that's actually a female. It's a biological female, and so it's funny to see how it's scary, really, to see how many people get so reactive, and they're so angry, and they're so convinced on these specific points of contention, but they don't even know what they're talking about. They don't even have the faintest idea. They're just being led by the nose by these big accounts or whatever who say things that aren't even true. It's very frustrating for me. I've done a lot of writing on this on my Substack. I think I have a pinned article called Mass Shootings in America that kind of deep dives all of the things that mass shootings are as opposed to what they aren't, and proposes a lot of ways that we could potentially, prevent them. I know that I personally have prevented at least 3 mass shootings just by being in these spaces and seeing something and saying something, and providing it to law enforcement and actively helping them to find this person so that we could stop them from doing something crazy. If someone like me is capable of doing that, then our federal government is definitely capable of it if they just put their resources to it. And then the question becomes, why aren't they?
Yeah. No, well, going back to what you were talking about regarding how we latch on to certain things, and we hear things being said by different influencers or whatever else. The problem that we have, and I see this going on again with the Charlie Kirk situation, is we latch onto a narrative that we like, that we feel We probably think it's true, but we also are emotionally invested in it. So
Yes.
anything that we think reinforces that narrative, it's confirmation bias at its
Yes.
base, right? We latch, and look, we've all been guilty of this, right? I know, I'm sure you've done it too. Like, we forwarded memes or something that come to find out it's not really true, but it's a dig at our political opponent or someone that we don't like, or
an AI video or a photo, right?
Like, we've all done it.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, what we need to be really focused on is the truth. We need to figure out what's true, what's not, and we can still have our narratives and our political beliefs and all of those things, but they also need to have a foundation of truth. And that's the key, right? It's like, like, I don't want to, whether it's the Democratic Party or whatever else, or, some political figure. We've seen a lot of this with Trump. A lot of stories were pushed with Trump. I'm sure we've all been guilty of pushing stories that aren't true against, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or Biden or whatever else. But the fact is we are all extremely susceptible to this. And we got to be focused on the truth. And I want, if I'm going to use something to bludgeon a political opponent or to make a point that I believe in, or we've all been susceptible to bad data. One of the things you're talking about, I haven't researched this totally, so I'm not exactly sure where we stand on, trans shooters, but what I don't want to do is be guilty of pushing forward a false narrative. And you got to be extremely careful. And of course, as the everyday civilian that's on social media, it doesn't really matter. But if you're somebody like us that, we care about, we actually care about
what's actually happening. Yeah. I want to be able to make my decision based on good data. Yeah.
And our credibility. Like, we want to make sure that we're pushing factual information and we're informing people and not deceiving people, whether that's wittingly or unwittingly, right?
Well, you bring up the confirmation bias, and that's really important, because what underlies all of this working is psychology, right? That's how we work. That's how we're designed to work. That's how we've evolved to be, to kind of use these biases to inform things that happen around us so that we can survive better. But over time, that's been exploited by other people who want to deceive or want to use people to promote a political agenda. For example, let's say that you're a person who really is in favor of stricter gun control. Maybe you're in favor of completely confiscating guns, right? And maybe you're even on the right, because there's plenty of them out there, right? A great way to do that would be to convince the right wing that we needed to start imposing background checks, mental health checks, or confiscating guns from a segment of society, right? And they know that by pushing this, something that makes them emotional, something that makes them upset, kids getting shot in a church, a beloved political figure being assassinated, right? If they can use that to convince people of something and lead them towards that, then that's what they're going to do, right? We're exploited very easily because of our tendency to react emotionally and our tendency to reject alternate hypothesis to something that we've already kind of firmly held in our beliefs for a long time. So that's like the old saying, right? It's way easier to convince a man of a lie than to convince him he's been lied to, right? So it's very, very hard for people to admit that they've been fooled. And that's another thing that's exploited. So yeah, I mean, it really does come down to the fact that people in general aren't that discerning. It takes a lot of mental energy to do the kind of research that I do, and the stuff that you probably do is also similarly taxing. And most people just simply don't have the time or the energy for that. And so they default to what they think is the safest thing. And it's very, very easy to lead most people because of that. So like you said, like, it's really just important for people to just stop and think, even if it's an influencer who you really, really like, or political figure you really like, you voted for them, they're great, but really stop and think. You trust them, right? But who can you really trust anyway? It's like these days,
Well, going back to what you're saying, like the things that we do, one of the things that I'm constantly struggling with and trying to stay extremely disciplined with is looking at every situation objectively, right? And every new piece of information objectively. And then, there's times when you find out that information that you have that emotional response to, where it's like, oh, I got it. This is it. It's like, that is the information that you really need to put through some sort of filter and sanity check, because that is your weakness. That whatever that piece of information is that you're getting ready to hit send on that post, that tweet, whatever you got going
We've all
on.
done it too. We're not perfect. None of us are,
100%,
right?
100%.
But one thing that I think that separates a good investigator from, or a researcher, whatever you want to call it, from a normal person, or which normal people are not good at this. And the reason is because most people have a hypothesis and they set out to prove it to themselves, as opposed to putting out a hypothesis and then trying to disprove that hypothesis, which is really the way you start to get to the closer to the truth. Like, so you have this, because you have to have a theory. Theories are what you base everything on. That's why the word conspiracy theory is so silly, because without a theory, what are you even trying to figure out, right?
Yeah.
And of course, a conspiracy is just two or more people conspiring to do something illegal. So really, of course, it all starts with a conspiracy theory, and then with time, you try to, prove or disprove this theory. But if you're just setting out to prove yourself right, you're almost never going to, or you're almost always going to default to that thing that proves you right. And I've seen unfortunately seen a lot of really good people fall victim to this. One thing I see a lot that's kind of my personal pet peeve is when we're looking at these child exploitation networks, like the one that I'm known for, which is the 764 network. People that kind of just default to the FBI is always wrong and everything they're telling us is false. Therefore, this big child predator ring that I can technically observe with my own eyes right now, it must be fake. It must be a fed op. It must be all of these things. And that it's almost like a question. It's like a way to stop asking questions. It's like, I'm just going to stop right there, and I'm not going to listen to anything that you have to say, because I've already decided that it's all some kind of Fed operation and that the FBI is just lying to me. And that's scary, because no, you do need to listen to this. These people are real. They're telling you the truth. And we need parents to listen and try to protect their kids from this stuff. And so in the same way, we see a lot of these things kind of happening, where people will automatically just jump to the thing that they've been kind of trained in their brain to think, and then stop there and not go further.
I mean, I've said that 100 times. It's like, just because of conspiracies, and we all look, there's been multiple conspiracies just within the last few years that we can point to. Whether it's COVID, whether it's lockdowns, whether it's immunizations and vaccines, whether it's January 6th. Like, there's a lot of things that we can point to that I think are very clear conspiracies. We can talk about there's people that will agree and disagree with this, but the fact is, I think regardless of what political spectrum you're on, I think we all agree that the federal government and other organizations, political organizations, are very capable of committing conspiracies.
Yeah.
That being said,
they lie a lot.
But not everything they do is a conspiracy,
right.
And not everything they say is a lie, and there's still elements that they do well, and we need, just like you said, the discipline and discernment to decide based on facts and based on evidence, because that's the real problem here. Is like, once you are sold on an idea, let's say everything the FBI tells me a lie, now you start completely rejecting observable facts, as you stated, and evidence for this, and then you will accept something that is even more preposterous, that has zero evidence and zero facts backing it, but you latch onto this, and then, like you said, you're going around looking for evidence to prove that in any little thing that you find,
making connections that aren't there. And then I've seen so many people go off the deep end, but like, back to what you said about foreign influence also, right? There's definitely a very, very, very specific, and I've seen it firsthand. I've seen foreign adversaries firsthand discussing ways to sow distrust in our institutions. That's part of the subversion, right? Is to try to get us to distrust our government, distrust the FBI, distrust our health authorities. The more distrust that they can sow, the more susceptible people are. Like you said, now you'll believe anything that confirms that. Now they can make up a completely fictional story, a psyop, like you've called it, and get you to believe it, because it confirms all these things that you believe. And the alternative is believing this institution that you've already decided you don't trust. And it's a dangerous place for America. It's definitely a place that our foreign adversaries want to see us there. They want to see us in this place where we don't trust the FBI. These child predator rings don't exist. Spooky, shadowy provocateurs from foreign governments or foreign extremist groups aren't grooming your kids to commit mass shootings, when in fact they definitely are. And we need to be acknowledging that this is definitely a real phenomenon. But at the same time, it's not necessarily all their fault. I mean, the FBI's done tons of shit to make us not believe them, right? They're not doing themselves any favors. So
yeah, this is the problem. Is this is a nuanced problem that requires a nuanced discussion. That not everything's black and white, right? There's some things that the FBI and our government. Well, I won't say our government. I don't know of anything that our government does really well, but there's some things that they do that are at least on the up and up. That one of the things I always say is that if you want the least effective, most expensive solution, the government's your answer. But the fact is like there are problems here. Law enforcement does do some great work. Not all of them, and the vast majority of them are good American people. There are bad actors within. There's no doubt about that.
Of course, yeah. But we can't look at the FBI, for example, as a monolith that is just this evil organization that's out here like puppeteering and orchestrating mass shootings. Like I've seen it. I've had to deal with the FBI lots and lots and lots of times, and my conclusion is that they're not capable of something like that. Like, to be quite honest, and I used to be one of those people too that was like, oh, maybe there's a big. But the more I look into it, the more I go, oh, I found the guy who was talking to that mass shooter, and he lives in Moldova. And he's a member of this, this accelerationist group in Eastern Europe. There's a lot of really bad actors in Eastern Europe specifically that are pushing our kids to do horrible things. And so as more I started to see this stuff, the more I started to realize like, oh, the FBI, like it's a scarier concept, honestly, to think that, we get this in the conspiracy that like, oh, the elites are controlling everything and FBI is controlling everything. It's actually a lot scarier to accept that no one's controlling this and that they don't have control of it and that it's actually a serious problem. It's a national security threat that's actually kind of out of control. And I think that that's just as scary, if not more scary, as believing that there's some, big shadowy organization controlling everything.
Well, and the other scary fact that people don't want to accept is that there are dozens and dozens of organizations, entities that aren't even related that will exploit the same events for different motivations, but the same outcome. And that outcome is all the things that we listed, subverting the United States government, undermining our institutions, causing dissension, distrust, and chaos within the United States.
Support for overreaching laws like gun laws and stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, and the thing is like we want to be able to point to one thing because we're only capable of processing pretty much one thing at a time. And the idea that there's all these different organizations out there that will exploit us and take advantage of us and try to defeat us in different ways, like that's a really scary thing.
Yeah, it is.
The FBI is an easier boogeyman because we can affect change through politics, through whatever else. These other things are much more complicated, and we're just like, we're not even going to pay attention to that.
Yeah, it is scary. I got to a point where I set out to find these shadowy provocateurs, fully expecting to find like links to the federal government or something, but in reality what I found was that this is a very stochastic threat. This is decentralized chaos. So accelerationism, the whole concept of accelerationism, the modern accelerationism movement was perfected or I guess like put out there by James Mason, who's the author of Siege. Which is basically he pushes for this idea of National Socialism and neo-Nazism and fascism. Like traditionally, we've had these organized movements that try to push for political change, and it's not working. What we need is a decentralized network of basically foot soldiers who go and do these things by proxy, infiltrate institutions, subvert people, provoke them to go commit terror attacks, and do all of these things to cause the country to collapse. And then once the country collapses, then we step in and we say, you know what, we need a government to save us. We need a fascist authoritarian regime. So this is I'm not saying necessarily this is what's going to happen, because I think it's a silly concept. I don't think that the end state of accelerationism makes no sense to me. But this is what James Mason and then these other people who kind of pushed the accelerationism concept. This is what they teach other people, that by having these decentralized networks, Telegram channels, right? These people never meet in real life. A lot of them, they live on Telegram channels with each other, and they do all of this stuff, and they share propaganda, and they indoctrinate vulnerable people in there, just fully within a Discord server or a Telegram channel. Now we're seeing a lot of these radical leftists getting indoctrinated in a very similar pathway. They're finding themselves into these Discord servers, and they're being indoctrinated and groomed, and they're, kids who are gender confused are being told that the government's Donald Trump himself is going to break your door down and force you to stop taking hormones. And that all of these things are going to happen, and that they're going to put you in camps and murder you. So these people are being really radicalized quickly.
Right.
I don't talk about it as much as I talk about the child predator stuff, but the radical militant left, especially like these cells of transgender individuals who are radicalizing and arming themselves and training, is concerning, because we've seen a similar operating like mode from these neo-Nazi cells in the past, where you would get all these people together and convince them that all these things are going to happen, the great replacement theory or whatever, and then you get them to go commit mass shootings. And now we're seeing that same thing happen to the radical left, and it's very scary. It makes you wonder if the same thing is happening there on the left now.
And it's the exact same way to create terror cells as well. I mean, it's
Right.
the same exact tactics, just manipulating different people from different walks of life. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, it's scary. It is a serious threat. What I will say is that, a lot of this stuff, there's people who are adults who this is happening to, right? But a lot of times these are kids. These are, we're seeing mass shooters become younger and younger, 14, 15, 16-year-olds. In those cases, those kids were given unsupervised access to the internet. That's what they all have in common. All of these new school shooters and stuff, all of them were given this unmonitored access to the internet. They were targeted by bad actors. They were pushed and provoked, and they were helped to plan. And on all of these things, all these factors converged in this kid going and committing a mass shooting and then killing themselves. It's a tragedy, really. As a mom, I find it really hard to see a 14-year-old as some kind of evil, mass shooter. I feel like something happened to this kid, that they were victimized in a way too. They were groomed online to do this. It's really, really tragic. And so, when we're able to stop one of these people and we see them get arrested or something, that's a huge relief. It's like, wow, that could have been another Covenant school shooting. Just us knowing where to look and knowing what to look for, we can find these kids who are about to go out and commit mass shootings and potentially stop them. So there are things that we can do to help protect our country from this kind of terror threat. It is absolutely a terror threat. That's the only thing that I can call it. Definitely not just a lone actor who is mad at that does happen, to be fair.
Sure.
There are mass shootings. There was one committed by a veteran not too long ago, that church fire.
Yeah.
And he was a targeted individual who believed that the Mormon church was, harassing him in his head, so things like that do happen. Unfortunately, it's just a mental health thing. But a lot of these shootings that we're seeing are coming from these online communities, and they're grooming them specifically to go do those things.
What role do you feel like antidepressants and things like that have in all of this? Does that make people more susceptible to grooming? There does seem to be a correlation with that as well.
You may not like the answer that I have
because
I've been studying exclusively mass shootings for years. I have a really lengthy database of mass shooters with different details about them in a sortable list. And it's actually not very common. In fact, I think that I don't know what the exact percentage was, but relatively few mass shooters in the past 4 or 5 years were actually shown to be on antidepressants. Of course, there's this argument you can make, which is like, well, we don't know because the autopsy wasn't published or whatever, which is true. But at the same time, there were lots of specific cases that I can think of where the person was not on any kind of medication and possibly should have been, because they were hearing voices telling them to shoot people. There was a really good example of this was the shooting in Maine. The guy started at the bowling alley. Do you remember that one? He was missing for several days. They finally found him. Robert Card was his name. He just took an AR-15 into a bowling alley and opened up, went to another place, started shooting. It was a pretty high body count, mass shooting. It was really bad. But, immediately they started talking about antidepressants. And then I go, well, that's weird because we don't even have any information. They start pushing that out before they even have any information. Well, it comes out that Robert Card, his family had been pleading with the police in the state and with the National Guard where he worked to get him, to force him to go to mental health treatment because they knew this was coming. They were trying to confiscate his guns themselves because they knew that he was about to go shoot someone and he refused any kind of mental health treatment. However, you heard a lot of these influencers pushing out a lie again, that he was on antidepressants when, it came out that he wasn't at all on anything. So what we found by looking at the data that we do have is that it was more common for some of these shooters to not be on anything, which, if you're thinking about this rationally, you're thinking, well, maybe, so can we make the opposite conclusion? Well, no, we can't, because there can't be a causal argument made anyways, right? And the reason is that because people who commit mass shootings are much more likely to be mentally ill, and mentally ill people are much more likely to be on antidepressants. So you can't prove a causation there anyways. However, I think that the biggest thing that I would caution is that this is another one of those things that can be used to push a narrative, and has been, along with the transgender thing, people were also saying that people on SSRI shouldn't be able to have guns. So again, you start to see this narrative is like, you've taught these people that SSRIs are a factor, even though dozens of studies have shown that they're not. But people become so convinced of this that they start to accept authoritarian measures as a potential solution. And so I don't know who started all of that. I do remember one of the big studies that people usually send me to be like, see, I'm right. And it was like written by somebody who was into holistic medicine. And I remember the article containing all of these links to like buy herbs and stuff, holistic medicine, right? So I was like, well, this seems kind of gimmicky. Like a person is just saying, all these bad things so that they can get you to go buy their vitamins. But to be honest, the data we have doesn't show a correlation at all. And so you could always make the argument that, well, maybe we don't have all the data. Sure. But why would you have drawn the correlation in the first place if the data didn't exist? Right. So I do absolutely support more studies on this, but at the moment, the data we have does not support that. And it's always been so bizarre to me that got so far. I just don't understand.
Well, I think people look for simple solutions, right?
Yeah.
That's there's this.
I'm not a fan of SSRIs. I think they're terrible, and I think they're overprescribed. But and they might be linked to violence too in certain situations. Again, you can't make that causal relationship because a lot of people are prone to violence anyways, and they're on psychiatric medications. But the correlation is just not there. I just don't understand where that came from.
Yeah, well, I think there is people that they want the simple solution, and there's a part of us that wants to go back in time and like fix this and or prevent the next one, and we want the simplest way to go about it. And for some people, I have always heard that narrative push, and this is a great example. I think you're making some really excellent points here in that. Well, yeah, the correlation here is mental illness. Obviously, if you are going to go shoot 20 people or whatever it is that you do, your brain doesn't work like the rest of us. And of course, you have you're much more likely to have been prescribed something, and somebody identified this problem in you starting at a really young age. So I think that makes sense. And
people are going to be mad at me about it. I know, I'm not promoting SSRIs. I think they're terrible. And I do I do also support more studies on this, like more like as shootings happen to push for that data. So we have more data points. I'm not ruling it out. I'm just saying that data doesn't currently exist. And I can think of several high profile cases where the family came out and said, we couldn't convince this person to take medication, even though they clearly needed it. So, I also worry that some of these narratives might try to push people away from getting mental health treatment. The same way I worry about pushing for gun control for people with SSRIs might cause a chilling effect that cause people to forego mental health treatment, which is also a scary thought.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I got lots of friends that, they don't want to go to the VA because
Because of stigma. Yeah.
Because of stigma, or because there's always been rumors that, hey, if you have PTSD, if you're diagnosed with PTSD or something like that, they're going to come take your guns. I don't know how true that is, but I wouldn't doubt if like there's other things involved where they use that as just one more
They
thing
could for like in red flag law state. Yeah.
Yep. So, but what I will say is I do think regardless of whether we're talking about antidepressants, we're talking about whatever else, almost immediately there does, after any large event, whether we're talking about a mass shooting, we talk about somebody, something like where Trump was, they attempted to assassinate him twice, or Charlie Kirk. What I see is a clear misdirection campaign that almost happens immediately, and it's always something like that. With Tyler Robinson or the Charlie Kirk assassination, the first thing that was being said was, oh, he was a right-wing guy and he came from a right-wing family and like all these other things and there's this whole litany of things that actually
Finger pointing.
Yeah,
he was one of yours. No, he was one of yours. No, he was one of yours. Yeah, both sides do that.
There's misdirection that takes place, and nobody wants to sit back and be honest and objective and say, okay, what is really going on here? And we can't, whatever we decided happened in this last similar event doesn't mean that we need to project the exact same circumstances on this particular, like these are different. Now they could have similar forces behind them, but we need to kind of assess each one objectively. And I don't think most people are very good at doing that.
Yeah, no, most people, like you said, they're looking for an easy solution. They're looking to confirm something they already believe because it's easier. It doesn't take as much mental energy. I mean, it's the same way. I don't expect people to go out and do the kind of research that I do. That would be crazy. I'm crazy. I don't know why I do this. Like, I don't think most people can do this because it's just too taxing and it's too emotional and it's dangerous. I mean, I know we haven't really talked much about what I've done personally, but I've been in the crosshairs of some very dangerous people, foreign terrorists, for the stuff that I've put out there and the stuff that I've done and for exposing these kind of groups. So it's not something I expect normal people to do. So that kind of makes it even harder because I can't just say, well, trust me, bro, but what I can do is I can take that danger on and I can put out the evidence so that you can see it with your eyes and you can make up your own conclusion from there.
Yeah. I definitely want to talk about some of that. Let's also talk a little bit about the censorship that you've been kicked off of YouTube. Talk a little bit about that and your experience with that. How did that come about? Is that related?
Yeah. So early on in my research, I took a lot of heat from a lot of certain creators on Twitch and YouTube who basically called me a conspiracy theorist, especially when I was trying to connect these mass shootings to accelerationism and to online provocateurs. Especially when I started to talk about the cult, Order of Nine Angles cult, people really started to think that I was crazy. I did get banned from YouTube for unclear reasons. It was a very strange ban. I'm told that kind of ban doesn't happen very often to partners. I didn't have any strikes. I didn't have a specific video that violated any specific rule. They basically told me they couldn't tell me why they were kicking me off. And when I pushed them and asked more questions, I got the response that, well, the terms and conditions that you agree to say that we can kick you off for any reason. And you don't have a leg to stand on here, so bye. So that's basically what happened to me on YouTube. I had about, I don't know, like 9, maybe close to 10,000 subscribers at the time. So I wasn't small, and I was growing. And what I was doing was I was putting out videos about these mass shootings and breaking them down and talking about how the people had been influenced by online subcultures and things of that nature, and that was really pushing against this is a white supremacy problem, which is what the mainstream narrative at the time was. And so I don't know how or why I got banned from YouTube, but I sure did. Yep.
So just to be clear, you got no warnings, you had no strikes.
Mm-mm.
They just took your channel one day.
Yeah, and the reason that they ultimately gave was promoting violent extremism, or promoting terror organizations or violent extremist groups, and which is obviously the opposite of what I was doing. So when I tried to go to partner support and talk to them about it, and then say, like, can you show me which video it was? Even I had dozens of videos. Which video was it? They told me we're not gonna be able to tell you that. So.
Yeah. And so for people that don't know, I'm just coming off of a week-long suspension myself. And this is a real problem, especially if you get heavily invested in YouTube or whatever else, is they don't tell you precisely what you did wrong. They'll sometimes they'll point to a video, sometimes they won't. And then sometimes they'll say, hey, this video violated our terms, and they may even point to something specific, but nothing in there makes any logic. No reasonable person. So the video that I got a strike from and was off for a week was from like 4 months ago. And then during that suspension, they also sent me a warning for another video from 2.5 years ago.
Yeah.
And
YouTube's bad, man.
Yeah. So, it's a very there's no one to talk to. Like, you can't get a hold of a person. Even, we now have 275,000 subscribers. I've heard that you're supposed to have this person assigned to you where you can talk to them. I don't know.
Only the favorable creators get that.
Gotcha.
There's a lot of favoritism going on with that.
If you vote the wrong way, you believe the wrong things, you don't get those.
Yeah, which is why you can find my docu-series on Rumble. They've been very helpful, and haven't even considered banning any of my work. So that's always good. But we tried to put some of my stuff back on YouTube under a different channel that somebody else, like one of my moderators, was starting to just repost my stuff, and they started to just remove the videos. Even for my most recent docu-series, which if you watch, it's confusing why they would want that to be off the platform. I understand it's, even X has unfairly, in my opinion, flagged it as sensitive content, and hidden it from certain people in certain countries. So I think that the nature of talking about this kind of stuff, this violent extremism, terrorism, and child exploitation, these are topics that they're kind of suppressed anyways, just by nature of the algorithm sees that it's sensitive, and they pose these limitations on your account, which makes it really, really hard to get this information out. And I really do think that that's one of the reasons. It's a little bit more of an innocent explanation, right? A little bit less of a conspiracy kind of what's YouTube thinking, but a lot more of like, well, the algorithm just understands that this is sensitive, and so it's suppressed just by nature of what it is.
Yeah, the algorithm explanation explains why it might get flagged initially, but I don't know about you, but my content always ends up being confirmed by human reviewer, and that's where things are a little bit weird to me. And look, there's no doubt that there's a certain political bend to certain organizations like Google, YouTube, some tech organizations, and
Google is YouTube, or YouTube is Google.
100%. So I think we need to know. I always say you got to know your operational environment and what you're dealing with, and operate accordingly. So that's definitely part of the game. There's no doubt about that. Yeah, I do think that the more people that are aware of YouTube censorship, and look, most of the people watching YouTube, even if it's like one of their favorite creators, suddenly they're gone. It's like, that sucks. All right, let me find another one. And people don't realize the impact that it has on you, the creator, and the fact. And what's really frustrating about it is there's just no recourse. Like, there's nothing.
Right.
There's no one to talk to. There's no complaint you can file. There's like, And then you can't, even if they do take your channel, you can't start another channel because you're banned for life. You as a person are banned for life.
No, when you say that, you're so serious that like I mean that you can't even use your Google account to log in and view videos anymore. You cannot even use YouTube. That was the extent of my ban. I'm not even allowed to sign on to YouTube. In fact, I have a Google TV that was signed on via my Google account, and I had to factory reset my TV and create a completely new Google account because that's how banned it was. And they MAC IP banned it too, because if I tried to make a new channel to watch YouTube using my computer, they would just automatically ban it each time. It's crazy. Like they're like, you can't even watch YouTube videos, lady. You're banned. I was like, what? It's crazy.
It's nuts. I never thought in America that's where we'd be, but that is exactly where we are. Let's talk about some of the different foreign organizations that have targeted you.
Yeah. So this is actually kind of a dangerous topic for me, to be honest.
Yeah. If there's something that you don't feel comfortable talking about, we can find another topic for sure.
Yeah. Well, so, as I progressed down the rabbit hole of research that I was doing on these cults and this online radicalization, I ended up finding a really, really sadistic and horrible child predator group called 764. It's a child extortion and exploitation group. These people are linked to the Order of Nine Angles in some capacity. They do use satanic imagery a lot. And what they do is they lurk on platforms like Roblox, where your kids may be playing unsupervised at a very young age, and they convince your kids to go to like a Discord server, and there they will groom them into sending them sexually explicit content. And after that, they start extorting them and blackmailing them into doing more and more horrific things. So it could be more sexual exploitation, but the biggest thing they like to do is to extort kids into carving their abusers' names into their bodies and self-harming, cutting themselves, making walls, like signs on the wall with blood, killing their pets. And ultimately, they'll try to get these kids to kill themselves on camera for their own enjoyment. There's no monetary gain here. It's just these people are very sick, awful people. And they've openly claimed that the reason they're doing it is because of accelerationism. Like they want to groom and abuse and subvert our kids and traumatize our kids and create a cycle of abuse. So it really is, I usually call it a terror attack using our children. Like it's a terror attack on our kids, right? It's really the worst thing you can even imagine. Most people have already shut me out at this point and said like, this can't even be true. But again, it is, you can go look it up. When I first started talking about the 764 network, it was not well known. And again, I went through the whole thing again of you're crazy lady. What are you talking about? This is too insane to be true. Ultimately it did end up being true, and all the attempts to suppress me and call me crazy. And then those people ended up looking really silly because the FBI came out gun swinging about April of this year, and they started to crack down and arrest these people and announce it and make a big deal out of it. So thankfully now the cavalry's come in. It's not just me. But at the time it really was just me exposing this group, and I felt very alone, and it was very scary. A lot of these people did threaten me in real life, threaten my kid, threaten my family, swatting attempts and things of that nature that I dealt with. This group is also connected to a wider network of extremism channels on Telegram and Discord. One of the ones operating on Telegram that you might have heard of is called Terrorgram. They were recently designated as a foreign terror organization by the U.S. And this is a group of people who specifically try to groom kids into committing mass shootings by getting them into these channels and indoctrinating them, mostly with like white supremacy stuff, honestly. But there's some other stuff too. Just accelerate the collapse is their big thing. I mean, it is accelerationism, although they do try to get their kids to target minorities and mosques and synagogues and things like that, which again, you could make the argument they're doing that because of the divisive nature of it, right? They're the ones that started calling these ex-mass shooters saints and canonizing them, kind of making them into these martyr-like figures, promising kids that they'll go on this calendar of saints and martyrs that they get worshipped after they're dead. So really pushing kids, basically turning them into like suicide bombers, right? That there's really no difference in what they're doing there. It's trying to claim that they're going to be martyred and all of these things. So Telegram is a really bad one. There's another satanic group that originated in Ukraine called MKY. It stands for Maniac Murder Cult, and they're just a satanic group of serial killers. I don't know, but they're crazy, stabby people, and they like to groom kids to go commit mass stabbings. And there's been a really big problem with this overseas in Western Europe. And we started to see it creeping into the U.S. So these are some of the bad actors who, rather than being kind of a smaller, like a kid in North Carolina who's 19 years old who just thinks he's really scary by sextorting kids, that guy's not very scary to me. But the guy in Ukraine who's a neo-Nazi in Ukraine who is grooming kids to commit mass shootings here in the States is a scary person, right? There's other people that have kind of come and gone, but the Telegram network, MKY, those are examples of these foreign terror groups that are using the internet to indoctrinate our kids and try to turn them into proxy terrorists. It's a lot.
It is a lot. A couple of things there. Number one, I almost wonder if there's not some element behind there just almost practicing mind control and people manipulation, like seeing what works, seeing what doesn't,
Sure.
seeing how far that they can push people to do certain things. Just like you said, there could be forces behind that don't believe in, Satanism or whatever the principle that is being projected, but it's just a matter of, hey, how can we perfect the system of targeting people, finding the right profile, and then getting that person to do whatever it is that we want them to do.
I think they've already close to perfected it.
I agree.
I mean, so one of the tide started to turn for me when it started to become widely known that the last few school shooters have been connected to this group that I've been screaming about for so long, the Order of Nine Angles and the 764 network. So the last 4 school shooters, including the one that happened on the day that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. In fact, just a couple of minutes difference between that shooting and the assassination. And that shooting occurred in Colorado. And so including that one, we're all driven by the same network online that's cranking out school shooters really quickly. It's very, very scary stuff. It should be a focal point for law enforcement. Like, if we can go to these spaces and find them, then they should be able to find them too and stop them. You can't stop all of them, obviously, but if most people knew the number of youth out there every single day at this very moment plotting a school shooting, you would be terrified. I remember there was a time when I didn't even want to send my kid to school anymore. I was like, I was frozen in just the sheer number of these kids out there who are ruminating on a school shooting at any given time in these chat rooms, hundreds. It's really, really scary. Recently, what we've seen them doing too, because they can't always convince kids to go commit shootings, doesn't happen that often, right? We've seen an uptick in swatting hoaxes and school shooter hoaxes where they're calling the schools and making them think that there's a mass shooter so that the police come, and it's a whole big thing. So you've heard of that happening at universities. It's also been happening at elementary and middle schools across the country. And it's a seriously out of control problem. And it's the same network of people doing that as well.
The other thing I want to say is, you were talking about some of the threats against you. Researching these topics, I came across several different texts, different screenshots, and I can tell you, folks, I can confirm some of the things that have been said against Becca. It's too horrific to even kind of talk about here, but some of the threats against her and her family and things like that are pretty insane. So
Yeah.
that information's out there if you want to search it. I don't know if you have links to that type of stuff. I don't even know if you want that type of stuff out there, but it's
Well, I've posted, several of those people have gone to jail, so that's always fun. It's always a silver lining, right? To the people who've threatened me, right? That several of them have gone to jail.
yeah.
Not just for threatening me, but also because when they were investigated, they had child pornography. They were producing child pornography. They were extorting these kids. They were doing all kinds of horrific things to kids. And so that's why they're harassing me and threatening me in the first place, is because I'm was the only person for a very long time, and still kind of am the only person who's really reporting on this group exclusively. And I do tend to kind of gloat when their friends get arrested, and that pisses them off. Yeah.
Well, one thing I could say is I think it's very clear that people that are out there voicing these different things, the amount of resistance and ultimately the threats that they get are proportional to how effective they are. And so, while that's really unfortunate,
Very
that,
true.
that you have to go through this, but we can look at whether, attempts on President Trump's life, attempts, the actual assassination of Charlie Kirk. We can look through history, all these other people that have been killed, been threatened, been beaten up, whatever it is, right? You have these groups, and we see also online character assassination and different ways to undermine people's messages.
I've definitely dealt with that too.
Yeah. So, I think people need to be aware of that, because I do think that there's a very clear pattern. You kind of know that you're watching. I don't care if you're talking about global warming. I don't care if you're talking about different things surrounding COVID-19. When you start talking to someone that has been indoctrinated or part of, or I think captured by a psyop, and you start presenting them a factual argument, it is a red flag for me when they're reduced to name calling or ad hominems, right? It's like, you're a racist, you're a climate denier, and I'm not talking to you. Like, they shut the conversation down. Then they personally attack you. They try to attack your credibility. They try to attack your character. And like, anytime that I see that at scale, especially, I'm like, stop. We are witnessing a phenomenon here that is more complex than I think we're giving credit for.
And I've dealt with that. I've dealt with smear. Some very public people have come after me for some weird reason. Didn't really make a lot of sense at the time. Still really doesn't. Also, just in general, with like normal people, me being who I am and not taking a political side, because that's not what I do. I don't really take a side, right or left. And I get called in the same day. I'll get called a leftist, liberal, crazy, and also called a Nazi fascist in the same thread.
Yeah.
Now it's like, well, which is it? It's funny to see how people react to a person like me who's just trying to tell them that their political biases are being exploited. That's basically what I'm trying to tell people. I would guess I would probably lean a bit more right in a lot of people's eyes, just because I like guns and freedom. But I've always said the same thing about smear campaigns and harassment. It's like, when somebody comes at you and they can't attack your argument or what you're doing, so they attack your character, baselessly or not, it's definitely a sign that they're losing. They're on the back foot and they can't do anything except try to assassinate your character. Then that's probably not the person you should be paying attention to. You should probably be paying attention to the person that they're trying to assassinate. And listen closely to what they're saying, and then try to figure out what that motive could be for trying to silence that person.
Well, yeah, and it's also a clear indication that they're not operating in good faith, right?
Right. True.
And they're not interested in what's true. They're not interested in discourse. They're not interested in learning maybe a different perspective. They're interested in shutting the conversation down because, whatever it is that you're talking about, they hold near and dear to them. They're emotionally attached to it, and they're not going to let it go.
Correct.
And, that's something that the best propagandists out there are really good at exploiting in people, and we all are susceptible to it. We've all been guilty of it, right? What else? What did I miss that you want to make sure?
I thought you were going to talk about the Charlie Kirk stuff.
Oh, yes. All right. Well, I kind of been sprinkling this throughout.
Yeah.
But I do think, look, I don't know where you stand on all this stuff, but one of the things that I've tried to do is like, you know, because of my background and things like that, I originally got kind of involved in some of the Butler stuff, and I went into the Butler attempt on Trump's life, completely convinced that this was a government operation and things like that.
Mhm.
Looking at the evidence and staying open to what I see and things like that, I came to a different conclusion. I think there's possibly a conspiracy, but I don't think there was 14 shooters, and we
Right.
had all these weird things going on, and when we walk into kind of a similar situation, and I will say this, the parallels between Butler and Charlie Kirk's assassination are crazy. When you talk
Yeah,
about, we
sure.
saw, people actually saw this guy laying in the prone on the roof, didn't say anything. We later have footage of them running on the roof. The parallels are just nuts to me.
Mhm.
With that being said, there is all these people kind of with using some of the biases that we talked about that like will reject any evidence that the FBI, the government, and the FBI is turned into like this umbrella term for law enforcement, because not just the
Right.
FBI.
Yeah.
Obviously, Utah authorities are involved in other organizations as well. And regardless of that evidence, they will find these other alternative theories. And I do believe everything that we're talking about, this entire situation, is related to accelerationism, whether that was a prompt for Tyler Robinson or whoever the shooter is. Look, I'm open to there being other shooters or somebody else, and I'm open to the idea of even Tyler Robinson being a patsy, because what I will say is I do think that there is a certain amount of evidence that we have that at least points to a couple things that I think are facts, and that is a frontal shot from the direction of that. I don't know if it came exactly from Tyler Robinson. I'm pretty convinced that was Tyler Robinson on the roof. I know that's up for debate, but I'm open to other things. All I need is some evidence to convince me.
Right.
And right now we have just what we know. We have, as reported by the FBI, we have DNA evidence on the firearm. We have DNA evidence on the spent cartridge. We have DNA evidence on the other cartridges. We have other evidence that was found at his house. We have footage of him on the roof. We have footage of him jumping off. We have footage of him going to that location that was, while it's not enough footage for us to determine anything, which was intentional. The reason that FBI footage was released was because at the time we didn't know who the shooter was.
Right.
But from that footage, his parents identified him independently, like, hey, I think this is our son. And by the way, where's that 30-06 that we gave you?
Yeah.
Called him and all these other things.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of evidence.
Yeah.
I do think there is mountains of other evidence the FBI isn't showing us right now, and that's
Sure. But there's reason for that. People always act like, why aren't they telling us this? It's because the investigation's ongoing, right? Like when they're still looking for the shooter, where they're still trying to figure out who's doing it, they'll strategically keep information from the public. That way that when they're interrogating that person, they can figure out if it's really the person based on like what they know or what they don't know, right? But also just in general, you don't want to give all the information to the public right away, because that could taint the jury and could cause issues with the defense, could get things thrown out. And so I think a lot of people don't really understand how investigations work, which I'm guilty of that too early on. It wasn't until I became involved with the investigations somewhat that I started to understand kind of, okay, well, that does actually make a lot more sense, But another thing that's interesting is I'm not sure if you heard of this. Is in my most recent video, my part 6 video. I talk about this a little bit. But there was another assassination attempt on Trump by a 17-year-old named Nikita Kasip, who had killed his parents and lived with their bodies for a couple of weeks. And then he had these people from the Telegram channel trying to guide him and guiding him across the country. He stole his parents' car. He was driving across the country, and he was ultimately going to assassinate President Trump at the instruction of these shadowy people who claim to be from Ukraine. you ask, like, well, why would Ukraine want to assassinate Trump, or why would anybody want to assassinate Trump? Well, you could make an argument that he's not as nice, policy wise, but you could also say, well, these people are accelerationists, and what would be the number one thing that would drive our country to the tipping point right now? The biggest thing that anyone could do would be to assassinate President Trump. That would be the biggest wave you could make. And so, of course, that's going to be the thing that they're trying to do. It doesn't have to be a deranged leftist, like they tried to make the kid in Butler seem like a deranged leftist, right? Because who else would try to assassinate Trump? An accelerationist, or a person who is being indoctrinated and groomed by an accelerationist. With the Kasich case, what was really interesting about that is that you could see the chats between him and these people who claim to be from Ukraine. Of course, they could be from Russia for all we know. Sure. It could be when you get into the Ukraine Russia stuff, then the likelihood of intelligence involvement increases dramatically, and so does the danger of looking into this kind of thing. But the people who were talking to this teenager were telling him that there's going to be 10 other attacks when you assassinate Trump. It's going to be like a 9/11 all over again. And after it's done, we're going to come and get you, and we're going to take you to Ukraine and give you amnesty, and we're going to make you into like a godlike figure over here. You're going to live with us. Obviously, none of that's true. None of that's true. They're convincing this kid that he's going to be this huge martyr figure. So you get to actually see the mind games they play with these kids, and the way that they convince them to go do something like this. And again, the goal is to destabilize America. And if you're going to destabilize America, there's not much you could do that would be bigger than assassinating the sitting president. And that's why I was never convinced that in Butler that this was, this was conducted by the FBI. Or I don't believe that. I don't believe that he was a leftist, a deranged leftist. I think that he was probably in a similar situation. We know that he was talking to people on Discord, and probably in a very similar way. When it comes to the Charlie Kirk assassination and Tyler Robinson, I think I've always, I'm just to be honest, I've always thought the official narrative that he was just angry at Charlie Kirk and it was a personal grievance was plausible. If you've been in these Discord channels with these lunatics who are, like I said, when I was talking about the radical leftists, right? Being indoctrinated into thinking that their lives are literally in danger. Yeah. Your trans friends' lives are in danger. They're going to put them in camps and exterminate them like the Holocaust. And you're watching this. It makes total sense that these people would respond in the same way that we've seen other extremist groups respond to such indoctrination. Of course, I'm not going to claim to have any kind of ballistics like expertise aside from being a competitive shooter. I'm not like a sniper or anything like that. But it is plausible to me that could happen. And then it would be exploited by accelerationists right after the fact.
Look, I think that the current evidence that we have, it is pretty overwhelming to me that it indicates that Tyler Robinson was the one that shot him. And, like you said, I think objectively speaking and going in with a default adversarial view and relationship with what I believe the FBI is going to tell us, I haven't been able to find areas where the FBI has lied. Mm-hmm. And I haven't found where they're showing major points of deception. Are they withholding material? Are they withholding evidence? Absolutely, for all the reasons that we just discussed, right? And in that vacuum of information, people are just stuffing in the craziest, most implausible theories.
I had to turn off, I logged out of X. Yeah. I was just being bombarded with the most insane palm gun. It was this, it was that, it was space lasers. I mean, it was just crazy the things that people were going off on. I don't think I've ever seen such a response from the public like I saw there. It was actually kind of disturbing to see how desperate people are to do anything but believe the narrative that was presented to them, and how desperate they are to make it the fault of this other group they don't like, right? And I'm sure I get hate for my opinions all the time, so it doesn't really matter, right? I'm telling you from my experience of seeing what's in these discords, what's going on in these leftist groups and the indoctrination and the grooming that's going on there. Yeah, I find it totally plausible that somebody would have a personal grievance like that. And that doesn't mean that's what happened. I could be disproven tomorrow, But with the evidence that we have, I don't see any, like you said, I don't see any holes that point to like a nefarious conspiracy.
Now, where we do see a lot of lies and deception, it's obvious. If you haven't, like, it's not coming from the FBI. We have just a ton, and that's one of the things I'm going to end up hitting tonight on our live stream. I'm going to go through the list of provable lies that we're getting from social media.
Yes.
And that's what we're seeing. Like, I don't know where those are all coming from. I don't know if they're all from one source. I think there's a multitude of motivations behind this. Some people are just prone to believe in these things. Some people are grifters and are going to push the sensational and salacious to get views and clicks. But I do think that there is a more organized element behind it, causing disruption, trying to
disruption is what and like I'll go back to the Mormon church attack, right? It turned out to just be a veteran. Yes, he was a Trump supporter. That's irrelevant. He believed that the Mormon church were putting thoughts into his brain. Okay, like he was not a mentally well person. It was not a politically based shooting, and whether he was a Biden supporter or Trump supporter doesn't even matter. It wasn't even relevant. But at the same time, there was a picture that came out of the shooter who had a Trump shirt on. And so many people became convinced that this was fake because a group of right-wing influencers took it and used AI to Photoshop Trump off the shirt. And then they posted a picture and said, actually, you guys Photoshopped the shirt to have Trump on it. And it's all a lie. Look at, this is the real picture without Trump on the shirt. Was this asinine point of contention? Why would you do that? Why would you deceive and lie to people when the archive of the Facebook page is right here? I'm looking at the archive of the Facebook page, right? Well, it was altered. Somebody got into the Facebook account and changed the photo. Why would this happen? None of it made any sense. But the number of people who were latched onto that because they could not accept that this guy had worn a Trump shirt 5 years ago was actually insane. It was just this crazy behavioral psychology study of what happens when you muddy the waters and you see who's actually a person who can use discernment and critical thought and those who can't. And the number of those who can't is actually really scary.
I agree. Yeah, no, and I do think this entire situation is being exploited by lots and lots of different people. And that's the thing, is like, do you only want to have cognitive security against government lies, or do you just want to be discerning against all lies? Are we looking for the truth, or are we looking for a narrative? And we all need to be extremely careful about that and understand that we're vulnerable to that. Like, we're vulnerable to it's almost inception in its nature, inception or suggestion or whatever you want to call it. Like, we're very vulnerable to being misled, misdirected, just because of our own personal biases. We want to believe that this person is, or this group is, the enemy, when we don't even see the forest through the trees. There's 100 enemies out there. And matter of fact, the ones that we consider enemies aren't even the most dangerous, not even by a long shot. And that's the thing that I think is being lost in all this. And the other thing too, like, I've been a huge fan of Charlie Kirk for a long time. I've been watching his content for many, many years. And what's really sad to me is seeing that everything that he built and everything that he stood for is being dismantled by people supposedly, allegedly trying to find justice for Charlie.
Yeah. That's like the sick irony of it, right? Is that his death is being exploited for something that he would not approve of at all.
Yeah. I mean, basically what they're doing is they're tearing down certain elements. First of all, I think TPUSA is probably doing better than ever. I think there is part of this where we become myopic. For instance, you've had a YouTube channel. You know how it is, where you get stuck on these like negative comments, and a lot of the negative comments, for most people,
I still do that on X and stuff. I could have 100 supporting comments, but it's that one mean comment that's going to stick in my head.
Well, the thing to remember is, like, 90% of the people that agree with you, support you, really like your content, they're not necessarily prone, because it's not this huge emotional thing to leave a comment to begin with. Like, they don't have any questions. They're like, oh, this makes sense. This sounds like a really reasonable person there. So they don't leave a comment. but
Right. Hit the like button and then move on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the people that we're talking about, right? You're trampling on their sacred narrative. So they're like, you're a Nazi, you're a Fed, Israel's paying you.
Right. I get called a Fed a lot.
So do I. I wish
it's so funny to me, honestly. I used to be the one calling people a Fed, so it's
I don't know if I ever called anyone a Fed, but the idea that, like, I have a long history on social media that is very libertarian in nature. I'm, you want to call me a conservative, libertarian. I don't even know where I fall in it, but I am very anti-government. Like, I think that we need to restrain government and go back to a very literal version of the Constitution. That's what I believe. And
that's basically me too.
Yeah. So I don't even know what box to check, but the idea that I'm a Fed, and or the other big thing is now I'm getting checks from Israel. The idea that I would, the idea that I would betray my country, and even the idea of accepting money from another country to say something
for anything.
I don't think people understand how little I care about money. Like my wife knows, she knows, because I just spend it left and right, and I don't really care
on guns and gear and stuff, right?
If I didn't have money, like, I have a really great life, I have family, like, we're doing okay, like, we have a business, I'm fine, I'm happy. I don't need money from Israel, and I would never accept any money. I don't care $1 billion, $1 trillion, I don't care what it is. You're not going to get me to voice an opinion that I don't hold.
Right.
I've been to combat 4 times. I've seen friends die. I've done all the things. I know what the cost of freedom is, and I would never violate that to give an opinion that's not my own.
Right.
It's just like, it's just
I'm essentially saying, I have a day job. This isn't my job. I know it's surprising to a lot of people, but I'm just a normal mom. I don't make a lot of money off this. The little money I make comes from my Substack subscribers. Thank you to all my Substack subscribers, because it does pay some bills, and that is helpful. But, ultimately, if this ended tomorrow, it wouldn't be the end of me. I would have, other support networks. But, it's funny about the Fed thing, because everybody who disagrees with you is a Fed, right? Everybody who disagrees. And, I've been very open with the fact that I've had to deal with the FBI lots of times, like dozens of times. There's a lot of cases that I've helped the FBI with, because I'm here watching these child predators exploit, these pedophiles attack kids and hurt kids, and like, I'd do anything to get these people arrested. I've very openly helped the FBI with some of these cases, and it's resulted in arrests, and that feels really good. I'm not going to let people try to convince me that somehow, our FBI shouldn't be going after pedophiles who are, exploiting our kids and trying to get them to commit mass shootings. Honestly, I think that should be the top priority. I can't think of too many things that are more important than, terror networks on the internet who are grooming and exploiting our kids like that. I have a very loyalty to my country and to the children of our country, to protecting those people. And I don't get into political content, so no one's accused me of taking money from Israel yet.
I've always been in political content, even when, we're fundamentally started off kind of like as a gun channel, and fundamentally that's what we are. But I've always, like, we've done a Wednesday live stream for years. Every Wednesday, we do this live stream, and it's primarily political in nature. But going back to the comment section for a second, it's like, we do get, number one, sometimes there's more negative comments than there's positive ones, which, by the way, folks, I want you guys to know, and I probably speak for Becca as well, like, when you do leave those positive comments and you're like, hey, I'll just say this, it means a lot to me, and I'm sure it does Becca as well. Like, those are, thank you for those. But that being said, then you go over to like the video like dislike, and it's at like 97, 98%. Like, that's the real number. And there again, a lot of people that even a vast majority of people that do like your video don't think I do the same thing. Like, I watch a video, I'm like, that was a badass video, and then I go off and like, oh, I never hit the like button. But if you don't like it,
I don't have a YouTube account, so I can't.
Well, that's
I can only watch it while logged off.
There's a like button on the Rumble as well. But I think it's really important to keep that in perspective, and sometimes I have to remind myself of that too. It's like, man, like, because it does affect you. It's not, look, for you guys calling me a Nazi or Fed or agent of Israel or whatever you would like, it ain't gonna do nothing. It ain't gonna change.
Honestly,
anything.
I've tried to get better about that because I definitely do take it personally a lot, especially being a woman as well. That's never, that causes a lot of additional issues. But
Women
yeah,
are very
I think
emotional.
there's something very human about that, about being there's something very human about being upset about, or taking, comments or wanting people to like you or whatever. That I think that actually humanizes you as opposed to some of these bigger accounts, which I'm not sure that they even read their comments because they're almost posting as if they're bots, right? They're just cranking out, and a lot of those are the same ones posting that disinformation we've talked about so much. So yeah, I definitely support your human creators and the ones that get up here live and show their faces. And there's definitely something to be said about that too. Just the bravery to show your face and not be an anonymous person behind a keyboard.
Yeah, I would also tell people, you need to watch out. Again, it should be a red flag to you if somebody's response to a question or an argument or a discussion is an ad hominem. It's like, no, they're a Fed.
Absolutely.
They're a Fed. They're getting checks from Israel. Like, that should be a red flag because they don't have a logical, articulate response for that at all. And it's the same thing, just like I said earlier, when it comes to, you're a climate denier, you're a racist, whatever. Like, no, it's because you don't have the facts on your side and you know it, and you feel vulnerable and scared. So you're like, you're a racist, I'm leaving. And you just try to shut down that conversation.
Right.
And then you make it you go on a campaign, a disinformation campaign against that person to try to undermine their credibility so that other people won't listen to them as well. And that you see time and time again, where suddenly someone that has an opposing view of yours, now their content is directed at you as opposed to the task at hand.
And if people are doing that to me, you really that's one of the things that never really works, because people are like, why are you attacking this person who's almost their entire platform is about exposing this specific pedophile group? So like, what reason do you have? Like, it's very bizarre. Like, what reason could you possibly have? Again, one of the very high profile people who tried to do this against me unsuccessfully, in my opinion, it was an anti-FBI narrative. Like, no, this person's doing something that could possibly look good for the FBI, therefore we have to stop her, and that's the only thing I could think of. But it didn't really work out for that person, because at the same time, everybody else is thinking, why are you defending this pedophile network? This doesn't even make any sense. Like, this isn't controversial stuff. This is fact-based stuff. You can go look it up. It's not fake. So yeah, but I've still dealt with that, even though I'm not shouldn't be a controversial person. I guess I'm a controversial person compared when you like a lot of the people who've done research on order of nine angles and accelerationism, or most of them have been very far leftist journalists. And what I've encountered throughout my journey of publishing my information as an independent person is that they don't like me. Because I'm not one of them. I'm not an academic. I'm not a countering violent extremism professional. I'm not a journalist, and they perceive me as being right of center, which makes me a fascist. And so I've also been excluded very heavily from the academic circles in this field of research, which makes it even funnier what you were saying earlier about the people who get attacked are usually the ones who are more effective. I don't see them getting the same kind of attacks, right? And it's because I've been effective at humanizing this. I'm a mom. I'm just a normal mom. Here's what I'm seeing. And that's very relatable. And that's something that networks like, international media has reached out to me. And I've done dozens of podcasts and interviews and documentaries, and that message has gone a lot farther than an article that someone wrote in some magazine that only leftists read, and it's because I'm giving this information to everyone without bias. I think that's what's kind of made me effective. So even though I still don't see myself as like the right person for this, because I don't know. I don't know. I've never really been like a content creator like mentality. I just like a normal person, but this is where my path led me. So here I am.
Well, here's what I'll say is, looking at your X profile, trying to do a little bit of research about you, and then watching portions of your documentary series. I will say that this interview has been much more intelligent and sophisticated than I expected, and I expected a lot. And I think you're extremely articulate in laying this stuff out, and you clearly, like, you know, when you talk to people, especially if you do it a lot, you realize people have really researched and dove deep or not. And you clearly have. You know, you're pulling this stuff off the cuff. You're just talking about it. I think you're exactly the right person to be spreading this message. So, you know, don't stop what you're doing. Don't get discouraged. You know, all those things. You know, don't let your confidence be affected in any way, because
I've taken a lot of arrows, you know. But yeah, we're still here. We're still trucking along, still fighting the fight. So
what would you want to say that, like, what would your message be to, if you could kind of summarize and get it down to, condense it down, like, what would your one message or couple of comments be to the American people out there that they need to be aware?
Yeah, I mean, speaking directly to parents and people who know parents, people with kids, or who know people with kids, right? My message has always been exactly what you said at the beginning of this interview, which is that the best way to prevent this kind of terrorism is actually to get this information to parents and encourage them or urge them to monitor what their kids are doing online, to have open lines of communication with your kids so that they know that if anything scary ever happens to them online, they can talk to you. I've been in the really unfortunate position of having to talk to child victims who are too afraid to go to the police, too afraid to go to their parents. It's usually not the police that scare them. It's usually getting in trouble with their parents that scares them, which breaks my heart as a mom, right? Because you think, well, if my kid were being sexually exploited online, I would want to know, and I wouldn't blame my kid. I would want to figure out who these people were, right? And so a lot of my work has been trying to talk to child victims and encourage them to come forward, and you know, even offering to talk to their parents for them, because I just feel so sad. You know, make sure that you have that relationship with your kid, that they know they can come to you if anything happens. Monitor what they're doing. Your kids should not have Discord. Your kids should not have Telegram on their device. And I'm going to be real frank, they shouldn't have Roblox. Roblox is basically a town square where your kid goes to talk to strangers. And even if you're not aware that that feature exists, it does. And it's a very, very scary thing for parents to go on. You know, I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say that after I watched one of your interviews, I went and I got my kid's device, and they were in a Discord server where they were spamming child pornography and gore and trying to desensitize my kid to these things. And so that's always been very impactful, hearing parents come to me and say, you know, because of you, my kid no longer has Roblox. My kid no longer has access to this and that. If we can starve these terrorists, these predators of victims, we can stop them, right? So the more people that this message gets out to, the better. Because it's really just about raising awareness about what your kids are doing online and being aware that these dangers exist in the first place, right? That's the first step.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know that these things evolve. It's Roblox now, which, by the way, I think they have a class action lawsuit going on with that, right?
Yeah, because we've been so loud. I say, like, I have mad care and energy a lot of times. Like, we've talked to representatives about it. We've seen what happens to kids on Roblox. It's been terrifying. And yeah, now the state's starting to take action, which, again, I'm like you, right? I'm not a big fan of federal, legislation against tech companies. I think the better option is to get more education out to parents. But yeah, I mean, in many ways, Roblox deserves all those class action lawsuits, because they have really just been complacent. And just let these pedophiles just go completely unstopped. It's crazy.
Well, and my point too is it's Roblox today, but it'll be something else tomorrow.
Absolutely.
It'll be another game, another platform.
Right.
Whether it's
Your kid shouldn't be talking to people online. There's no difference between letting your kid go to a Discord server to talk to strangers and dropping them off in downtown area and telling them to go just talk to people on the street. There's no difference. When we were kids growing up, it was always like, don't go to that white van and take candy from strangers, right? Watch out for white vans trolling around the neighborhood. But now these people know that they can do basically the same stuff to your kid without even leaving their homes. Your kid can be kidnapped in your own house, being extorted and threatened, and you have no idea that they're being abused like that because they've got their door closed and they're very good at hiding it. You know, they're teenagers. And so yeah, it's a very scary concept for parents to realize that their kids can be abused like that, just silently.
And most kids are even 3-4 years old or more technologically advanced than their parents are.
Absolutely. It's
that's
terrifying.
that people need to realize. Like, devices are I mean, there's so many problems with them, between, having a device babysit your kid, having causing psychological problems because of antisocial behaviors, because we're not having that human interaction that we used to, causing, parents and kids growing apart because that relationship doesn't even seem real to them anymore. The real relationship doesn't seem real, but these relationships online with nobody that, not only are they not people that they know, but they're probably not who they think they are.
Right. That too. Yeah.
It's terrifying.
And little boys are being victimized too, a lot, not just little girls. We have these it's completely separate, but these Nigerian scammers who pretend to be girls and gets illicit content from boys and extort them for actual money. And it's the same thing as the stuff that I'm dealing with. It has a very, very high suicide rate attached to it. It's really, really tragic what happens to these kids. They're so terrified of getting embarrassed or getting in trouble. They're ashamed. And so it really does start in the home, making your kids aware of this danger at an age appropriate level, and letting them know that they can always come to you, and that there is a solution that will fix it. Right.
It's a scary world out there, folks. You need to be paying attention. You need to be paying attention to what your kids are looking at, watching. You need to be what you're supposed to be, and that's a guardian, right? Making sure they're safe. Well, listen, Becca, I really appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate your courage, and I hope to have you on a regular basis. I think this is something that we need to talk to, and there's also several other elements of this that I think people need to be aware of and reminded of on a pretty regular basis, and it'd be great to have you on. Anything else you got?
No, just encourage people to go check out my Substack and watch that documentary series. There's 6 videos. And I think I always say that I'm a much better writer than I'm a speaker. So it helped me to be able to write scripts and actually make those videos to help people understand what all this is. It's just a lot of words. It's very hectic, but I think that I put it together pretty well in that series. So definitely go watch that. And
you did all that editing, all the voiceovers, everything yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I mean, it's very professionally produced. It's very good. Very good. So again,
I taught myself.
I don't know what you tell yourself in the morning in your morning routine, but you are the right person. You be in that mirror like, I'm the right person for this job. I'm doing exactly what I need to do. All those things, that self-affirmation stuff. Well, listen,
I appreciate you.
And don't go anywhere. I'm just doing an outro, but you're not going anywhere.
Okay.
All right, folks. Well, listen, I hope that was helpful. I hope that was informative. Definitely go check out all of Becca's stuff. I'll put links down in the description below, and I'll share the stuff on X. Make sure you follow us both on X. Again, I just came off this suspension, and a lot of people on YouTube, there's not even a way that I can even tell you I'm suspended. So people were emailing me, Gary, where are you? What happened? You okay? Anyways, we're going to have Becca on again very, very soon, but go check out all her stuff down there. Follow us both. Links to all that stuff down in the description below. But until next time, stay armed, stay ready. We'll talk to you soon.